There are 9 churches in the Appalachian Mountains where no preacher has said a single word in over 80 years. Not because they burned down, not because they fell apart, because the last time someone tried, something happened inside those walls that made an entire congregation walk out and never come back, some of them vanishing from any record at all. Locals won't drive past them after dark. Hikers who go near them report the temperature dropping for no reason. And the 9th church on this list has a warning carved into its door frame that nobody has ever fully translated. Stick around till the end. You'll want to see exactly what it says. Number 1. The first disappearances. Appalachia is old. Older than most of America wants to admit. Before the coal companies came, before the roads were cut through the ridgelines, there were small wooden churches built by settlers who needed somewhere to bury their dead and somewhere to beg God for mercy through winters that killed entire families. Many of those churches are gone now, rotted back into the mountainside. But some are still there. And the ones still standing are the ones people wish had fallen down instead. Our first stop is a church known locally only as the Hollow Chapel, tucked into a fold of forest in eastern Kentucky. It was built in the 1890s by a small mining community that no longer exists. For decades it held regular Sunday service, weddings, funerals, the normal rhythm of small-town faith. Then, in the winter of 1936, the entire congregation gathered for a midnight service during a snowstorm, and by morning, the preacher was gone. Not dead, not found, gone. His coat was still hanging on the back pew. His Bible was still open on the pulpit, the page torn out. The congregation scattered within the year. Families moved away one by one, and nobody would explain why when asked. The chapel was locked up and left standing, and for almost 90 years, no minister has agreed to hold a service inside it. Hikers who pass through report the same detail again and again. The temperature inside the chapel drops several degrees below the temperature outside, even in summer. Local park rangers have measured it and have no explanation. They just tell visitors not to linger. The second church takes us into West Virginia, into a hollow so narrow that sunlight only touches the church for about 2 hours a day. It's called Cross Ridge Church, and it was abandoned in the 1950s after what old residents vaguely refer to as the incident at the revival. A traveling preacher held a week-long revival there, and by the final night, 3 members of the congregation had reportedly gone missing from inside a locked building. No forced entry, no sign of struggle, just empty seats where people had been sitting minutes before. The remaining congregation refused to ever meet there again. The building was never torn down, out of a strange local superstition that tearing it down would let something out that was currently trapped in the walls. To this day, the doors are chained shut, not to keep people out, longtime residents will tell you with a straight face, but to keep something in. 2 churches down, 2 disappearances that no one has ever explained. And if you think that's unsettling, wait until you hear what happened to the widows in Tennessee, because their story doesn't end when they wake up. Number 2. The dream that wouldn't stop. Our third church sits above a Tennessee hollow so remote that the county didn't officially map the access road until the 1970s. Locals call it the Widows' Church because after it was abandoned, 3 widows in a row, unrelated by blood, living decades apart, reported the exact same recurring dream. A woman standing at the altar in a black dress, turning to face the pews just as the dreamer woke up. Every single time. The church was originally built in 1911 for a congregation of about 40 families. Church records, kept now in a county archive, show regular services until 1948, when the log simply stops. No explanation. No final entry describing a decision to close. It just ends mid-sentence, mid-list of names for an upcoming baptism. Genealogists who've researched the area found that of the 7 families listed in that final unfinished entry, 5 left the county entirely within 2 years. The other 2 families have no further public records at all after 1949, as if they vanished from history itself. The 4th church takes us to North Carolina, to a small Baptist chapel beside a creek that floods every spring. This one is different because the building itself isn't the source of the dread, the graveyard behind it is. Locals call it Miller's Rest, and the story goes that in the 1960s, a group of teenagers broke in on a dare to ring the old church bell at midnight. Only 2 of the 3 who went in came back out. The 3rd was found 3 days later, sitting upright against a headstone, completely unharmed physically, but he never spoke another full sentence for the rest of his life. He lived another 40 years in a group home 2 counties over, and the only thing he was ever recorded saying about that night was a single phrase, repeated to nurses for decades. They asked me to stay for the next service. No one ever figured out who they were supposed to be. Notice something. 2 churches, 2 counties, 2 completely unconnected communities, and both stories end with someone being invited to come back. We're going to see that phrase again before this list is over. Keep it in the back of your mind. Number 3. The church that burned twice. The 5th church brings us into Virginia's Blue Ridge, to a building so isolated that even modern satellite imagery struggles to render it clearly through the tree canopy. It's known as Ashford Church, and it holds the distinction of being the only church on this list that burned twice. The first fire, in 1922, was ruled accidental, caused by a knocked-over oil lamp. The congregation rebuilt it stone by stone over the following decade. The second fire, in 1961, broke out during an empty midweek night with no lamps lit, no electrical wiring installed, and no logical ignition source ever identified by investigators. After the second fire, the remaining stone shell was left exactly as it was found, scorched, roofless, open to the sky. No one has attempted to build there a third time. Hunters in the area still avoid crossing that particular ridge after sunset, citing nothing more specific than a bad feeling that doesn't go away until you're well past it. Our 6th church is perhaps the most documented because it actually made regional newspapers at the time. Set in the mountains of eastern Kentucky near the Virginia border, it's known locally as the Snow Church for the way it seems to attract unusually heavy, localized snowfall even in mild winters, sometimes with drifts recorded at the church that are completely absent just half a mile down the road. In 1958, the entire congregation, around 60 people, reported experiencing the same disorienting sensation during a single Sunday service, several minutes that none of them could later account for. Witnesses described it not as fainting, but as if a chunk of time had simply been removed from the middle of the service. The pastor gave one interview to a local paper before refusing to discuss it again for the rest of his life. He described looking up from his notes, seeing the clock, preaching for what felt like seconds, and then looking up again to find that 11 minutes had passed, and half the congregation was quietly crying without knowing why. The church closed within the month. It has never reopened. 6 churches in, and every single one follows the same unspoken rule. Something happens once, and the doors close forever. No one ever tries a second service. Not once, in over 100 years, across 9 different communities. That should bother you more than any single ghost story. And it's about to get stranger, because church number 7 comes with witnesses who are still alive today. Number 4, the lights that won't leave. Our 7th church takes us into a stretch of Appalachian, Georgia, known for its unusually high number of ghost light sightings. Unexplained floating lights reported by residents for well over a century. The church itself, called Pine Haven Chapel, sits directly in the middle of the area where these lights are most frequently seen. Built in 1887, it operated without incident for decades until a fire and brimstone revival preacher arrived in 1933 and delivered what witnesses described as an increasingly frantic, almost panicked sermon about something he claimed to see standing in the back of the church, something the rest of the congregation insisted was not there. He left town the next morning and was never heard from again. The church closed shortly after, and locals began reporting the ghost lights with much greater frequency in the years that followed. Paranormal investigators who visited more recently note that electronic equipment consistently malfunctions within roughly 100 feet of the building, a detail independently reported by multiple unconnected film crews over the decades, none of whom knew about the others' footage. The Eighth Church is small, easy to overlook, the kind of building most people would drive right past without a second glance, which locals will tell you is exactly the point. Known simply as the Quiet Church, it has no dramatic fire, no missing preacher, no single defining tragedy. Instead, it has a string of small, unsettling coincidences spanning nearly a century. Every family who has ever attempted to hold a service there, for any reason, has experienced a serious misfortune within the following year. A house fire, a sudden illness, a death in the family, loose enough to dismiss as coincidence if you only heard it once, but locked in enough by local memory that not a single person in 3 generations has been willing to test it a second time. 8 churches down, 1 left. And this last one is the reason the entire list exists, because everything you've heard so far has been building to a single carving on a single door frame that nobody has ever fully translated. Number 5, the last church deep in a remote pocket of the Appalachians, straddling the line between 2 counties whose boundary was never fully agreed upon, sits a small stone church known locally only as the Last Church. Nobody agrees on exactly when it was built. Some records place it in the 1870s. Others suggest it predates official settlement of the area entirely, built by a small, isolated religious community that left almost no written history behind. What is agreed upon is this: sometime in the early 1900s, the entire congregation stopped attending within the same season, and every single family connected to that church either left the region permanently or, according to local genealogical records, simply has no further trace in any public record at all. Gone. Completely. The building still stands. The pews are still inside, rotted but upright, and carved into the wooden door frame, in lettering that historians have examined and dismissed as unusual but plausibly period accurate, is a short phrase that no one has ever definitively translated or explained. Some believe it's a warning. Some believe it's a blessing that was never finished. Others believe it isn't even a language at all, but a private symbol system used only by that isolated community. Whatever it is, generations of local residents have treated it the same way, as a reason to never, under any circumstances, hold another service inside that church. Step back now and look at all 9 together, and the pattern stops feeling like coincidence. A congregation gathers as normal. Something happens that no one can fully explain, and instead of trying to understand it, rebuild it, or bless it away, the response is always identical. Walk away completely. Never come back. Appalachian communities were not superstitious in a casual way. These were hard, practical people who buried their own dead and survived winters that killed the unprepared. A church wasn't just a building. It was the literal center of community life for 100 miles in any direction. Walking away from one meant losing weddings, funerals, holidays, the entire social fabric of isolated mountain living. And yet 9 times, in 9 different corners of these mountains, entire communities made that same impossible choice. Almost instantly, almost without discussion. Some of these stories probably have rational explanations buried somewhere in 100 years of retelling. Carbon monoxide from old wood stoves can cause the exact disorientation and memory loss that might explain 11 missing minutes. Isolated communities facing disease outbreaks sometimes reached for supernatural explanations rather than face something more painful. Grief does strange things to memory, and stories grow sharper with every fireside retelling. But here's the detail that keeps researchers coming back to these 9 places generation after generation. In every single case, the response was identical. Not repair, not investigate, not simply replace the preacher and try again the following Sunday, the way communities normally recover from tragedy. Just silence and a locked door for 100 years and counting. Maybe that's the real mystery here. Not what happened inside those 9 churches, but why an entire culture of practical, hardworking mountain people decided, again and again, across a century and hundreds of miles, that some doors are better left closed. So if you're ever driving through the back roads of Appalachia and you spot an old church set back from the road, windows dark, no path worn to the front steps, you might want to keep driving. The locals already know why. That's all 9. But Appalachia is full of places like this, tucked into hollows the maps still get wrong. If this kept you glued to the screen, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive into the mountain's darkest corners. Drop a like if you made it this far, and share this with someone who needs a reason to lock their doors tonight. And let me know in the comments, which of these 9 would you actually dare to walk into? See you in the next one.